So the question is, what is the individual's responsibility to the community? And to what extent are we morally obligated to help others?
I guess I'll start off then.
Make sure you speak up too because of the camera.
I mean, my deal was in the. I mean, if you look at like constitutional rights and what you know allowed to do and everything, I mean, you really have no set responsibilities. You're not required by any like law or anything to help your community or be involved in your community or give back. I mean, everybody has the choice to work for their community or sit at their home and do nothing. I mean, that's a choice. I mean, there are obviously repercussions, taxes and things you have to pay, and you have to provide for your family if you have one and stuff like that. But I mean, the choice is there. So if you look at it in a very technical sense, there's no required responsibilities that you have to fulfill as an individual and community. I mean, but that's obviously not morally right, I guess, and it's not a way to be a good neighbor and kind of live your life. I mean,
yeah, because if you don't do anything at your home, you sit there like Jake was saying, sit around and do nothing, not help the community, but everybody else did that. You can't really. If you want to help yourself, sometimes you have to help the community thrive, and so it benefits you if you help the community.
yeah, I think that's one of the things that I thought about was that, like, I mean, if everybody had that mentality of I don't have any responsibility, I'm not required to work or do anything for the community, then I mean, eventually it would reach a point where our infrastructure would fall apart. And I mean, if everybody had that mentality of I'm going to sit at home, then the country would not be able to function on a level that the country needs to function. So.
I think that one of the things that isn't really stated but is understood is that you should be considerate and respectful to everybody in your community.
Yeah, I kind of went back to the golden rule, basically, like, if you want to be, like, give back if you want to receive it, because I feel like you'll be rewarded if you give back to your community, and if not, then you're going to have consequences that the whole community is going to suffer from.
As far as who's supposed to help out in the community, I feel like we're obligated to help those who are less fortunate than we are because we've been blessed with what we already have. And since we've been blessed, then it's our obligation to bless others with what they don't have.
I think that's a pretty big part of today's society. I mean, two of the most important values in American society today are hard work and being a good neighbor. I mean, hard work is inherent in the idea of America. I mean, for centuries our country has been a beacon for people who, if you work hard enough, then you can come here, and if you work your best and do your hardest, you can achieve success. I mean, that's kind of the American dream. I mean, that's, and so I think between hard work and like giving back to a community, and then also the kind of moral, I guess, obligation. I'm not stealing the word from it, but I mean, I think that's an important part of today's society is that you are a good neighbor, because I mean, a society, especially in the community, is small towns like Ruston, and of course even smaller towns like Shudrin. I mean, there's a sense of community, and I mean, people know people, and if you're not like contributing, I think there's definitely repercussions that you.
But in the context of the question, what is an obligation? Is an obligation something you're required to do, or is it something you just ought to do?
Well, I think the key word there is morally, because I mean it's a moral, but then again, who defines morals? It's
well, in the sense of the first prompt, what is responsibility? Is responsibility is responsibility something we have to do to remain in the community, or is responsibility something we are morally obligated to do?
Yeah, because it's, I mean, you're not, like, I mean, in today's society, it's not like, a long time ago where if you didn't contribute to the community, you would not be allowed to be there. I mean, because there's plenty of people, I'm sure, in Ruston that sit at home and do nothing. They don't contribute at all. So, I mean, that's obviously, in this sense, it's a moral thing, because we're not going to, like, outcast somebody if they don't work or if they don't
So that
do
brings,
something for the
that
community.
brings up the question: who determines the universal responsibility, if there is one? Like, if there is something that we all should do, who determines that?
Well, I basically came up with it. I went less tangible and kind of more abstract. I just said an individual responsibility simply to love. I quoted the Bible and it said, "Let no debt remain outstanding except a continual debt to love one another." So I mean that really sums it up in my mind that we're morally obligated to love one another at all times. And so as far as like tangible things, I mean we have the responsibility to pay taxes and all that, but I mean we don't really have a responsibility to our community and to our fellow citizens except to love one another.
I feel like we're not obligated to, like, you're not supposed to maybe give, like, money or anything like that. You don't have to do that. You can give your service, or you can give just respect, or be there when somebody needs it. It doesn't always have to be tangible. Like you say, you don't always have to be able to touch it. It doesn't always have to be money.
Yeah, I definitely agree with it. It doesn't have to be a tangible thing. And I mean, I think when you talk about responsibility to the community, I mean that goes back to kind of just to being a good neighbor, maybe. Just because, I mean, you know, I mean, for instance, I mean, just an example of, you know, this is something that's not, you know, you don't have to, but it's a nice thing to do. And again, it's kind of a moral, not obligation, but a moral feeling kind of thing. Like my neighbor, she's been in the hospital for a couple of weeks, and she's coming home soon. And my mom and a couple of other women in the neighborhood have all organized, or are organizing, you know, people to bring her lunch and to check in on her and stuff and make sure that she's okay. And I think that's part of the whole kind of neighborly thing, and especially, like I said, you know, a small town like this, being a good neighbor is a really important part of life. And I think that today's society really impresses upon people that kind of being a good neighbor and how important that is.
So, right. So, could those responsibilities that we have to our community vary, or how would they vary depending on how we define community? As far as like, is community our neighborhood? Is it our family? Is it our city? Or is it all American?
Well, I definitely think that they vary. I mean, obviously, I mean, your duty to your, you know, responsibilities to America are going to be a lot, you know, greater in, I guess, I don't know the word for it. They're going to be a lot bigger than your responsibilities to your next door neighbor. I mean, on the next door neighbor thing, I think it's, you know, more of a kind of just being a good neighbor in the sense, you know, that what that entails, you know, not being unfriendly and rude and stuff.
Is it really like Rustin, or is it bigger than that?
I think, I mean, it really, it's kind of a subjective. I mean, you can't, you know, it like John said, it's going to vary wherever you define community, you know, because we can define America as a community because we're a different, I mean, for sure we're a different, you know, way to have a country. Maybe that didn't really sound that good, but that's another way it came out. I mean, we're definitely a different type of country than has been in the world for, you know, a long time. We're a different place. So, I mean, that sets us aside as a community in a sense of the word. I mean, you have your communities of your neighborhood. Ruston is a community. It's a small enough town, I think, that it can be defined as a community. I mean, it's definitely subjective.
As far as like, if you're defining a community as being just Ruston, I think it'd be a lot easier to do, like help out the community rather than helping out the nation,
Yeah.
like America as a whole. Because, like Sam said, you can love everyone and you can love people wherever you go. But as far as doing tangible things like community service, then it'd be easier to do things inside the community.
And I feel like the community is more defined by like the people that you come in contact with, because that's who you're like directly like affecting, like who you're around and everything. And I feel like that like if it's your community, it's just people that you're helping out on a daily basis. And I feel like it doesn't have to be big things. Like it can be little, like as little as just like shaking someone's hand or like saying hi to them in the hallway. Like that's being like courteous, and that's really what like it's the good neighbor thing would be.
Well, no, I really think, I mean, Ruston High in itself is somewhat of a community. I mean, we all share you know, a school spirit. I mean, participate in sporting events and, you know, cheer on our fellow members. And I think that in that sense, I mean, it's a community.
I think a community is maybe it can be defined as a group of people with a common goal, because if you can consider Ruston High School a community will have a common goal, you know, get good grades, get educated, and we can also consider, you United States as a community, because we'll have one common goal is to better others and better ourselves.
So then that kind of broadens the responsibility, because like responsibility for your country is a lot more than just for us. And like the man have to, sign up for at 18 for the army to be drafted, maybe be drafted, and that's a responsibility to our country. So that's really broadening it when we don't really know what specific community is. There's lots of different responsibilities for different communities.
And I think, kind of going on what Rachel said, I mean, and what Erica said, it's definitely, it varies, like, I mean, with the draft or, paying taxes, I mean, that's something that, as a good citizen, you're supposed to pay taxes and kind of help out, the rest of the country. Or, I mean, if you're in the hallway and you see somebody looks like they might have been crying, you just want to go give them a hug and, tell them have a good day and I hope it gets better. I mean, that's, and I think that when it gets on that personal level, I mean, like, in the school setting, when you're with your friends or your neighbors, I think that that's where the moral obligation really comes in. Because, I mean, obviously, if you're on, the national level, if you don't pay taxes, there's repercussions, you've broken the law, stuff like that. But, I mean, when you're in a smaller setting, like, a neighborhood or something, that real moral, just being a good person, I guess. I know that, obviously, a good person is a kind of an abstract term, but, I mean, I think you'll understand what I say. I mean,
For Hero, what we did for Udenia, that really shows that we're a community, that I kind of see the word obligated as loosely, like you're not, when you do this thing, you don't feel like you're obligated to, you want to, because you feel like you're supposed to, not that you're supposed to, but it's the right thing to do. You're not like obligated as you're supposed to or anything like that. You just do it because you want to help this person out, because like what Sam said, you love everybody.